The year is 1944. Europe remains in chains. Nazi Germany still controls vast territories, its banners hanging over conquered cities from France to Poland. But across the Channel, in Britain, the Allies prepare for the most daring gamble of the war. A strike that will turn the tide, break Hitler's grip, and bring liberation to millions. This is the story of Europe's liberation, from the storming beaches of Normandy to the streets of Berlin itself. It began in the early hours of June 6th. As dawn broke over the English Channel, the largest armada in history stretched across the horizon. More than 5,000 ships, carrying 156,000 Allied troops. For months, deception had hidden the true landing site. Hitler expected the blow to fall at Calais, but instead, the Allies struck the beaches of Normandy. As the landing craft neared the shore, German machine guns opened fire. At Omaha Beach, American soldiers waded into a storm of bullets, artillery, and steel obstacles. Many never made it past the surf. Yet, inch by bloody inch, they clawed their way up the sand. Elsewhere, British and Canadian forces landed at Gold, Juno, and Sword beaches. And before dawn, airborne divisions had parachuted into the French countryside, seizing bridges and crossroads to block German reinforcements. By nightfall, the Allies had secured a fragile foothold on the continent. The price was steep. Over 10,000 casualties on that single day. But the door to Europe was open. The struggle for Normandy was far from over. The hedgerows of northern France became killing grounds. Thick walls of earth and vegetation concealed German defenders and slowed Allied tanks. Every field, every village had to be fought for. But in late July, Operation Cobra shattered the German lines. American forces broke through, unleashing tanks and mechanized infantry into the open countryside. The German army reeled, trapped in the Falaise pocket, where thousands were encircled and destroyed. With the enemy in retreat, the road to Paris lay open. On August 25, 1944, the French capital erupted in celebration as Allied troops rolled into the city. After 4 years of occupation, Paris was free. General Charles de Gaulle led a triumphant march down the Champs-Élysées, cheered by crowds waving the tricolor flag. France was liberated, but the war was far from won. Seeking to end the war quickly, the Allies launched an ambitious plan, Operation Market Garden. Thousands of paratroopers dropped into the Netherlands, tasked with seizing bridges that would allow ground forces to cross the Rhine and drive into Germany. At first, success seemed within reach. Bridges fell into Allied hands, and armored columns pushed forward. But at Arnhem, the key bridge over the Rhine, British paratroopers found themselves surrounded. Cut off, undersupplied, and outnumbered, they held for days before being overwhelmed. Market Garden had promised a swift victory. Instead, it became a costly setback. The war dragged on, and winter loomed. On December 16th, the quiet forests of the Ardennes exploded with fire. Hitler launched a desperate counterattack, the Battle of the Bulge. In freezing snow, German tanks and infantry smashed into thin American lines, driving a wedge into Allied territory. For a moment, it seemed the Germans might succeed. Roads were choked with retreating troops and refugees. But in the town of Bastogne, the U.S. 101st Airborne held firm, surrounded but unbroken. When the Germans demanded surrender, General Anthony McAuliffe gave a one-word reply: nuts. As the weather cleared, Allied air power returned, striking German columns from the skies. By January, the offensive collapsed. The last reserves of the Wehrmacht were spent. While the Western Allies fought through France and Belgium, the Soviet Red Army pushed from the east. In the summer of 1944, Operation Bagration crushed German Army Group Center, advancing hundreds of miles into Poland. As the Soviets moved west, they uncovered horrors beyond imagining. In January 1945, they liberated Auschwitz. The world saw, for the first time, the full scale of the Nazi death camps. Millions of men, women, and children murdered. Soon, the Western Allies, too, would encounter these camps. At Buchenwald, Dachau, and Bergen-Belsen, soldiers walked through gates of barbed wire and discovered a nightmare that words could barely describe. The war had become not only a battle for territory, but for humanity itself. In March, Allied forces reached the Rhine River, the last great natural barrier into Germany. At Remagen, American troops captured a bridge intact. Engineers rushed to reinforce it as thousands of soldiers poured across before it collapsed. Soon, pontoon bridges spanned the river, and Allied armies surged into the heart of the Reich. Town after town fell, while German soldiers surrendered in droves. The end was near. In April 1945, the Soviet Union launched its final offensive. Millions of Red Army troops converged on Berlin. The city became a fortress of rubble and despair. Street by street, building by building, the Soviets advanced under relentless artillery fire. In his bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery, Adolf Hitler raged, then fell into silence. On April 30th, he took his own life. 2 days later, Soviet soldiers raised the red flag over the Reichstag. The symbol of Nazi power was crushed beneath the hammer and sickle. On May 8th, 1945, Victory in Europe Day, the guns finally fell silent. After nearly 6 years of war, Europe was free. The cost was staggering. Tens of millions were dead. Cities lay in ruins. Families shattered. Nations scarred. But from the ashes rose hope. The liberation of Europe had ended tyranny, restored freedom, and opened the path toward rebuilding a shattered continent. Yet the shadow of the war would linger. The Cold War was already beginning. The struggle for peace and freedom was far from over. This was Episode 5, Liberation of Europe, 1944 to 1945. The story of sacrifice, courage, and the final defeat of Nazi tyranny. If you've enjoyed this journey, don't forget to subscribe to Dusk and Times for more powerful stories from history. Leave a like, share your thoughts below, and join us as we continue exploring the epic saga of World War II. History lives when we remember. In the next episode, we will discuss how Europe was burning, but in the Pacific, an even deadlier storm was rising. From the jungles of Iwo Jima to the waters of Okinawa, the Allies would face Japan in a fight to the bitter end. Next time, in Episode 6, War in the Pacific, 1944 to 1945.